Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So let's start. I mean, let me start. Let's start off with some thank yous. I know normally you do your thanks at the end of the conference, but let me start before the time betrays us. I would like to say thanks, and a special thanks, of course, to Professor Anthony Thirlwall for being with us throughout the whole seminar. I mean, all the various sessions that we have had. So a special thanks to Anthony Thirlwall, and of course also to Penny for joining us for this seminar. And I think it was a very important occasion to acknowledge Tony Thirlwall's dedication of his work and his life. I mean, to thank him for his generosity, because he has devoted his life and his work to unraveling the intricate and difficult problems of less developed economies. And there are not so many economies around in the world that decide to focus attention mainly on the problems of less developed countries. And Tony Thirlwall is one of them. And he has done it in a very genuine and profound way. So he has given us a number of papers and books unraveling the problems of economies like the Mexican economy. And for that, I think we have to thank him. We have to acknowledge, to recognize his contribution. So thank you very much, Tony, for your work, for your contribution. Next, I would also like to thank all of our presenters. As you recall, the seminar started off with the presentation of Esteban Perez, a long-standing friend of mine. We were classmates in the New School for Social Research, and ever since we have remained very good friends. So special thanks also to Esteban Perez. Then we had, of course, in the seminar, the contribution of Professor Tony Thirlwall. He also presented a paper, a very interesting one. And afterwards, we had Ricardo Zuma, a friend from Brazil, from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, who also gave us a very nice paper, which was just an outcome, actually a byproduct of his research on an open economy macroeconomics. Also, we had Professor Heinz Kurz, who, as you recall, he discussed Max Weber's contribution to economics, which is very rare, to have a presentation of Max Weber's economic theory. Max Weber is mainly known as a sociologist, and he's very famous among sociologists, at least much more than among economists. And last week, we had the presentation of our Brazilian colleague, Carmen Feijó. And today, our seminar comes to an end, at least for the time being. I'm sure Professor Benjamín García Páez and Dr. Hideo Taniguchi will surprise us next semester, organizing another seminar, which will run throughout the next semester. So we are looking forward to such a surprise. So today we have, like I said, the final conference, and I am very happy to present Dr. Fahd Boundi Traki, who is a very good friend. Fahd earned his PhD in economics with highest honors from the Complutense University of Madrid in 2017. So I was very lucky to sit in his so to speak, jury. I mean, I was one of the persons who attended his graduation, and of course he submitted a wonderful dissertation dealing with the Mexican economy, and he did so in a very, very original way. So I have actually I have a good memory of his dissertation. Then Fahd came to Mexico, to UNAM, on a postdoctoral research fellowship, and he worked with me at the graduate faculty of economics. And of course, he also conducted a very productive research. Now, his research and interests focus on international capital movements and intersectoral competition, and the influence of intersectoral competition on intensifying uneven development among nations from a political economy perspective. Actually, Fahd feels very comfortable with the classical political economy. And what we are about to present today is an analysis of international economic problems from a classical political economy point of view. Of course, we know that the various economies of the world do not grow at the same speed, at the same rate, and explanations as to why this is so, why countries diverge more than converge are numerous, but in this paper, the paper presents a sort of a different point of view. We acknowledge that there are very important demand side causes and reasons why economies grow at different rates. But in this case, we focus also on the supply side. And I think the paper has been very well put together. Let me, before I ask Fahd to begin the presentation, let me say that, I think this is very important to mention, I think this is the only occasion I will mention it, is that the paper was rejected twice. And I remember long ago a conversation with Tony Thirlwall, in one of his visits to UNAM. We were talking about my editorship of Investigación Económica. I think that was around 2010 when we celebrated the 70th anniversary of Investigación Económica. And Tony pointed out something very funny. He said, why don't we start a new journal that we might call it the Journal of Rejected Papers? And I'm sure he added, this would be the journal that would receive, the majority of papers, because many papers are rejected. Well, this is one of them. This is a paper that was rejected twice by very prestigious journals, I must say. But I want to also mention that finally, the paper was accepted in another also very prestigious journal. And I consider that the paper, that the journal that decided to accept our paper is much better than the other two journals that rejected it. And of course, the reason why the paper was finally accepted in this third journal has a lot to do with Fahd's insistence, with Fahd's steadfast work and devotion to producing fine work, to producing sound research. So thank you very much again to all of you. And also I would like to thank Benjamín and Hideo for organizing fruitfully and efficiently our seminar. And also, last but not least, thanks to all of you for attending our seminar. Thank you very much. So, Fahd, would you like to start, please?
Yes, of course. One moment, please. I'm sharing my screen. So, one moment. Okay. So, can you see my screen? Is
yes.
My PowerPoint? Yes?
Yes, yes, it's here.
Okay. So, well, as Ignacio stated, this paper has bad experience with some journals, but finally has been accepted, and we are very happy. And also, firstly, I would like to express my thanks for this invitation. It's for me a big honor to be a part of this seminar in honor of Anthony Thirlwall. And I'm very happy to be stay here. And also, I would like to express my thanks to all the presents. I hope that this work will be useful for the students and also for the researcher. And in the next 30 minutes, I will present our work in tilted absolute cost advantage and sectoral competitiveness, empirical evidence from NAFTA and the European Union. Given that Perrotini has gave an outline of our work, I will go to focus my presentation on theoretical framework and the methodological issues and the analysis of the results. Okay, so what is our starting point for making a theory of absolute cost advantage? Well, the starting point is the meaning of natural prices or production prices in political economy. In the works of the classical political economists, there are several passages explaining that market prices, as determined by supply and demand forces, are continually gravitating toward natural prices in Smith-Ricardo sense or production prices in Marx sense. These natural prices is only another name for cost production, according to David Ricardo, and depends on the more permanent forces of production conditions and of income distribution, according to Ian Stillman. Also, Ricardo states that competition, the principle which apports capital to extract in the required and provided push market prices to natural prices. Okay. One moment, please. So I have some problems. Okay. I tried to, okay, yeah. Sorry, I had some problems. Okay, so Verify the classics, both classics and Marx, establishes a twofold dimension of competitions, namely intra-sectoral competition or within sectors and intersectoral competition or among sectors, across sector, right? As for within sector competition, firms struggle to conquer as large a market share as possible, lower prices, and advertising become the weapons to attract the largest possible number of consumers. According to Sheikh, these two seemingly contradictory trends coexist as those capital with best generally reproducible technical conditions of production in every sector operate as the regulating capital or price leaders. then we can state that the relative two commodities, given that market prices are governed by natural prices, Sachs, who follows Adam Smith, emphasized that production prices could be resolved into wages and profits. Supposing that production prices, supposing that production prices are defined as the sum of unit labor cost plus profits plus input costs, the price of any commodity may be initially expressed as the sum of that component. Okay. However, given that Smith states that the price of means of production may be decomposed into wages and profits, which mean that the natural prices of any commodity will be determined exclusively by these two components, Sachs formalized Smith's decomposition by using the notion of vertically integrated sectors put forth by Pacinetti, right? This means that the price of any commodity can be expressed as the sum of vertically integrated unit labor cost plus vertically integrated profits wages ratio, okay? Then, by using the notion of vertically integrated unit labor cost by Pacinetti, we can calculate or compute the vertically integrated unit labor cost. In our equation, this component denotes the rho of direct labor coefficients, which are the ratio between labor expressed in hours and gross output. This expression is the inverse matrix of total requirement that is a little differs from the Leontief matrix because it includes both the requirement, the consumption of inputs, intermediate inputs, and fixed capital. And finally, this means the diagonal matrix of real wages. Okay. Given that we can decompose the prices as the sum of vertically integrated unit labor costs plus the ratios of profit and wages integrated vertically, according to Sachs, this component, which means the relation between the vertically integrated profit wages ratio of the sector I between the same component, it is the vertically integrated profit wages ratio in sector G. Given that the distortion, I'm sorry. Given that this distortion term is relatively small, we can approximate this equation as follows. Then the market prices, the relative market prices, will be governed by the relative vertically integrated unit labor cost. Okay, so although Marx and Smith are agreeable on this issue, that is, industrial national terms of trade are regulated by the equation. I'm sorry, I have some technical problems, and I don't know why Okay, I don't know why. Okay, sorry. Given, sorry, I repeat. So, a moment, please. Okay, so as I said before, while Smith and Marx are agreeable on these issues, that is, the market prices are regulated by vertically integrated unit labor cost, the consensus breakdowns was we moved to international trade, okay? Ricardo states that the same rule which regulates the relative value of commodities in one country does not regulate the relative value of the commodities exchanged between two or more countries. To demonstrate this assertion, Ricardo discussed two mechanisms that will level off the trade balance post-festum, okay? First, following the quantitative theory of money put forth by David Hume, the international prices of commodities vary as a function of the amount of gold in circulation. That is, a country exhibit a trade deficit will experience gold outflows, and become more competitive thereby, and vice versa. Later on, considered even on his own time, Ricardo asserts that international capital flows face a multitude of obstacles. While regretting this fact, he acknowledged that is a condition sine qua non to level of trade balance in the long run, as otherwise capital will tend to migrate toward countries with profit rates above the global average, thus condemning countries with the worst profitability condition to a grim fate. Ricardo concludes that intersectoral comparative advantage override intrasectoral absolute advantage as a regulator of the real terms of trade between countries. However, SEIC strongly opposite to Ricardo two mechanisms. The first one, following the monetary approach intended by James Stewart and Marx, SEIC counters Ricardo arguments contending that an increase in the amount of gold in circulation does not necessarily result in an increase in the general price of labor. Instead, it will raise commercial banks' reserve and decrease bank interest rates. SEIC maintains that his view is consistent with Harrod's insightful observation according to which state flows are inseparable from financial flows. More precisely, trade deficits are offset by financial capital inflows in the balance of payment, thereby refuting the Ricardo dissection between international trade and international finance. In this regard, SEIC argues that long-term real exchange rates are determined by relative integrated vertical unit labor costs of regulating capitals. In other words, the country with the best general technical condition of production and the lowest relative wages will have an absolute cost advantage in subsectors. Thereby, we can approximate the real terms of trade by using this equation. In this equation, real effective exchange rate are determined in the long run by the relative integrated vertically integrated unit labeling, not tradable between tradable commodities and not tradable commodities. Okay, so in this sense, our theoretical framework states that the real vertically integrated unit labor costs are those factors that determine in the long run the real effective exchange rate. In this sense, sorry, I don't know what's happened with my presentation. Okay, in this sense, our hypothesis that we would like to test is that the real effective exchange rates of both the United States and German manufacturing sector vis-a-vis those of their NAFTA and European partners has been regulated over the 2014 period by the relative vertically integrated unit labor cost. In this sense, the data used to estimate our variables were retrieved from the national input-output tables and socioeconomic accounts from the World Input-Output Database released 2016. Our panel data consists of 18 manufacturing sectors from the national input-output tables for NAFTA and the European Union countries. So I want to highlight that in our work we have included United Kingdom because the period does not include, of course, the Brexit, right? And we are testing our hypothesis over 2014 period, and then formally the United Kingdom was a state member in the European Union. Okay. Also, for compute the real wages, consumer price indices with base year 2010 were gathered from the Bureau of Economic Analysis from the United States, the National Institute of Statistics and Geography of Mexico, and Statistic Canada for computing the NAFTA hourly wages. Prices is from the European statistic. It is Eurostat. Okay. So we would like to test this hypothesis, and then we have computed real effective exchange rate has by multiplying nominal effective exchange rate by the relative prices of any sector. While the vertically integrated unit labor cost for each sector of manufacturing sector from NAFTA and European Union countries was calculated by assuming any column of the vertically integrated unit labor cost according to Pacinetti methodology. Also, to control the influence of both international movement of money capital and even technical progress, we have included in our model the relative vertically integrated profit rates and the relative vertically integrated output capital ratios. In the case of vertically integrated profit rates, we used the methodology applied by Miller and Goldwyn, and in this expression, phi is a row vector of profit, gross output ratios, and capital count is a diagonal matrix of the relationship between capital stock and gross output. To compute the vertically integrated output capital ratios, we use this equation. In this equation, this component is a row of direct output capital ratio, and then we only sum any column from this expression. Okay, in this regard, to test our hypothesis, we compute 3 econometric models estimated by ordinary least square. These 3 models I write as follows. The first one, for NAFTA, we have transformed all variable in logarithm, and we have this linear relationship. Similarly, for the European Union, and for the third model is a combination of NAFTA and European Union countries. In the first model, the national countries, the United States. In the second model, Germany is the national country. And the third model, we have decided use the United States as the national country. Given that we are using the second generation of panel co-integration test, our diagnosis starts by testing whether the three models are suffering the problem of multicollinearity. Sorry. According to our test, the three models appear not to be exhibit a collinearity problem among the regressors. The second step was testing whether in our models exists the problem of cross-sectional dependence. According to literature, in panel data, the problem of cross-sectional dependence is endemic, and then is not suitable to apply the first generation of panel co-integration techniques, because this technique assumes that assumes the hypothesis that cross-sectional independence. According to our analysis, the three models are suffering the problem of cross-sectional dependence because the Pesara CD test suggests that we have to in the presence of cross-sectional dependence, slope heterogeneity in panel data may arise. Then we turn to test the null hypothesis of slope homogeneity by using the Pesaran and Yamagata test and Blomqvist and Westerlund test. According to our results, we must reject the null hypothesis, and then we also we should control the slope heterogeneity in our data. Given that the preliminary data analysis disclosed the existence of both cross-sectional dependence and slope heterogeneity, the econometric strategy to be applied for testing the hypothesis is based on the second generation of panel co-integration test. The first step is to verify whether the variables at level are not stationary, applying the cross-sectional augmented in Pesaran and Sin test by Pesaran. A second step, we examine whether the series are co-integrated using the panel co-integration test and the error correction model co-integration by Westerlund. Lastly, the long-run relationship between variables are estimated employing the mean group by Pesaran and Smith, the correlated effect mean group by Pesaran, and the augmented mean group developed by Herbert and Thiel. Now we move to analysis of results, and I only summarize the mean results. Firstly, the Pesaran-Smith test, the mean advances of the second generation of unit root test is that the Pesar and Sips test can represent those observable processes that lead to cross-sectional dependence through a single common factor, and then this test can obtain results more robust than the first generation. According to the results, the Pesar and Sips test rejects only the null hypothesis of the existence of a unit root for the lag 0, both for the log of real effective exchange rate and the relative vertically integrated profit rates. For the model of European Union, the variables at level contain a unit root test in some form, as we cannot reject the null hypothesis of most cases. The result for the model that combines NAFTA and European Union countries, the results appear to support that the series are not stationary, since the null hypothesis cannot be rejected for most lags. Therefore, we can assume that our variables are non-stationary and integrated in the same grade. However, it should be highlighted that a set of non-stationary variables should be co-integrated to be economically significant. We employ the second generation of panel co-integration test developed by Western. The first test contrasts the null hypothesis of no co-integration. And according to our results, we can reject this null hypothesis as the p-value are much lower than 0.05 of the 5%, supporting the alternative hypothesis of some panels being co-integrated. The second model, or the second test, consists in an error correction model that overcomes the limitation of mode residual based co-integration tests because it does not impose a common factor restriction. Following Pershing and Westerlund, we used the Bartlett-Kearney windows by approximately 3 and robust p-value bootstrap replication to compute this test, this panel co-integration test. Similarly, most statistics can reject the null hypothesis of no co-integration, and then the empirical evidence support the alternative hypothesis that the panel is co-integrated as whole, or at least one unit is co-integrated. Then statistical information support the hypothesis of a stable long-term relationship among series. Okay. Now we move to interpret the results from the co-integration relationship. Although the mean group estimator is robust in the presence of slope heterogeneity, this estimator does not consider cross-sectional dependence. Therefore, the robustness of our estimation depends on CCMG and MG results. It should be highlighted that CCMG estimator and MG estimator not only control for cross-sectional dependence, but they are also control to unobserved common factors and structural breaks. According to our results, for NAFTA, ceteris paribus, 1% increase in relative vertically integrated unit labor costs decrease the real effective exchange rate by a range between 0.047% and 0.119%. However, our control variables may be not significant. the latter results does not contravene our hypothesis because these variables were included as control variables. For the model that includes European Union countries, a 1% increase in relative vertically integrated unit labor cost, ceteris paribus bring about a decrease in real effective exchange rates by a range between 0.201% and 0.023%. Unlike the NAFTA model, in the European Union model, the control variables are statistically significant. Finally, for the model that combines the NAFTA European Union countries, a 1% increase in relative vertically integrated unit labor cost induces a ceteris paribus depreciation of real effective exchange rate by a range between 0.109% and 0.013%. Interestingly, the estimators report that the rate of profits has a strong statistical significance. Okay, our results are also consistent with other studies that have econometrically tested the hypothesis of absolute cost advantage. In our manuscript, we are explaining why our results are consistent with these works, and some works are Martinez Hernandez, 2010, Sheikh, of course, Sufildi Saliki, and Saliki, Paraskepopoulou, and Sufildis, and so on. So now we move to concluding remarks. I don't know if Ignacio would want to express the last line, or excuse me, Ignacio, I can.
Okay, yeah, as you wish. Yeah, I can do it. All right, so after the presentation of the theoretical framework and the empirical analysis of our hypothesis testing, we come to the conclusions. Now, firstly, the increasing asymmetries from NAFTA and the European Union countries are rooted in domestic structural phenomena, international competition and capital flows. Secondly, persistent trade imbalances between countries in both economic areas derive from disparities in technical conditions of production and relative real wages. Third, the effect of an increase in the relative vertically integrated unit labor cost is similar in the US and Germany. Both the German manufacturing sector and the manufacturing sector tend to benefit vis-a-vis the NAFTA and European partners' reduction in production unit cost. Fourth, relative vertically integrated unit labor costs are a good measure for long-term intersectoral competitiveness in the countries under study. Free movement of money capital in NAFTA and the European Union strengthened the position of the economy with absolute cost advantage in some manufacturing sectors, and therefore weakens those of the other countries. Okay, so move ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Next, even when the wage deflation strategy is able to bring about short-term competitiveness, in the long run, as the technical conditions of production do not improve relative to those of the economies, these gains, I mean, the deflation strategy will fade away in the long run. So it's not a good strategy to base competitiveness on wage deflation. Both North American and European policymakers should promote policy framework strategies for improving cost competitiveness, focus on those factors that affect in the long run the technical conditions of production, instead of imposing wage adjustments that just increase income inequality. Of course, further research should empirically test the validity of absolute cost advantages theory. In the model, more countries could be, the number of countries could be increased, and using different panel configuration techniques suitable for cross-sectional dependence and slope heterogeneity. But we are happy with our results. We think that the results are robust, and the conclusions are based on empirical evidence. And like I said at the beginning, yes, the paper was rejected twice, but we are persuaded that at least the first time, the paper was rejected on ideological grounds rather than on scientific assessment of the content of the paper. And the second rejection was based also on some sort of a skewed interpretation of our results. Thank you very much. I think this is it. And now I would like Benjamín and Hideo to take over so we can start the discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fahd and Ignacio. Can I ask a question of clarification?
Yes, Benjamín is in charge now.
Oh,
yes.
Can I ask a question of clarification?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
When you're estimating these equations of the real effective exchange rate on the left-hand side and unit labor costs, everything is in logs. Yet the elasticities that you're estimating, at least as I understand it, seem to me to be very low. And if your hypothesis is that real exchange rates are fundamentally determined by unit labor costs, you might expect an elasticity, even with other variables controlled for considered, to be much closer to 1. So my question is, am I interpreting these elasticities correctly? And if so, why are they so low?
Okay. Can we get a little more? Yes.
I can carry on as well.
Of course.
Because I have an idea for a second paper.
Great. Most welcome.
Okay. Which is to use your results to ask the question and answer the question. To what extent do these real exchange rate changes determined by unit labor costs explain the patterns of trade across countries between NAFTA and Europe, between NAFTA, whatever? So what I'm getting at is you don't talk at all, and that's not what your paper is about, but the role of non-price competition in international trade. So you're talking really as if the only thing that matters is the exchange rate to determine unit labor costs. But if you remember, Caldor wrote a very powerful paper back in the 1970s, which was called The Effect of Devaluation on Trade in Manufactures, I think the title was, published in 1970. And what he showed there was that countries like Germany and Japan that lost competitiveness through unit labor costs rising faster and their nominal exchange rate appreciate, actually increased their share of manufactured exports in total exports. While United States and the UK, which increased their competitiveness, actually lost their share. And it's sometimes called in the literature the Caldor paradox. And it's a paradox because you expect exchange rate changes, unit labor cost changes to affect the pattern of trade favorably. But in fact, in this case, not so. And the explanation, which I think is now generally accepted in trade theory, that it's non-price competition that affects trade, not price competition. So a suggestion for a second paper based on that is that you could look at what you estimate to see how that has affected the pattern of trade over this period, 2000 to 2014. You may end up with a Caldor paradox, you may not.
Okay. Thank you.
But can you answer my question about elasticity?
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. Do you want to address the first question and I take care of the second one, Fahd?
So yes, I want to respond on the question of the elasticities. Why maybe are relatively low, right? So it's important to highlight that the most important problem in panel data is cross-sectional dependence. Why? Most panel data techniques neglect to control cross-sectional dependence and usually incur the so-called over-reject the null hypothesis. We think that one of our contributions is that we are controlling the cross-sectional dependence in our data, and maybe that our results appear to be weak, or the coefficient reports weak relationship because we are controlling this dependence in the data. Also, I would like to point it out that that given our database only offer data for for a period very short, may that the coefficient are not showing a stronger relationship between our series. But I think the problem is the techniques of that we have used, and so I maybe is perhaps that if we had, in fact, we in the first version we used the first generation of panel integration techniques, and the result reported stronger coefficients. Do you remember, Ignacio?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And then, so the difference is basically that we are now controlling the cross-sectional dependence, and I think that is if other works using these techniques maybe obtain the same coefficients.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know if that satisfies Tony's first question, but let me now deal with the second point. Thank you, Tony, for the idea. I think that is a very promising idea for a second paper. And then, of course, we will discuss that. I mean, I'll discuss that with Fahd. Perhaps we will address the problem. And it would be interesting to prove whether there is a sort of Caldor paradox in this set of countries. And yes, you are right, because I mean, the aim in this paper was not to deal with non-price competition. The idea was to look at the determination of the real exchange rate, and to what extent, you know, I mean, international trade integration and the European Union, I mean, the European integration based on a common currency would improve competitiveness in this country. And I think at least in one point, a very important one to my understanding, our result is robust in the sense that competitiveness does not depend so much on price competition itself, but it depends on productivity. And the idea of testing the relationship between the exchange rate and market prices based on a relative vertically integrated unit labor cost was to prove the importance of productivity precisely in the manufacturing sector that Kaldor himself singled out as the most important sector for economic growth, at least for long-run economic growth. But of course, I mean, your idea is welcome, and we will try and perhaps produce another paper, I don't know when, dealing with non-price competition and to explore whether there is Kaldor's paradox in these countries. Okay. Benjamin?
Okay, Francisco, why don't you ask you some question?
Thank you very much, Professor Perrotini and Fahd. This is very nice to meet you, Fahd. I also follow your works on these topics, and it was a very nice presentation about the Sheikh's theory of the real exchange rate. But I have a few points and probably one or two questions. The first I want to mention that the unit labor cost is made of two things, you know, real wages and productivity, as Professor Ignacio was mentioning. No, there are two parts there, and this is the unit labor cost, or relative unit labor cost, is according to the theory is the main determinant that explains the long-term fluctuation of the real exchange rate, right? So I have questions when the other part of the equation that you make or you estimate a little different than Sheikh and myself. Professor Sheikh took the interest rate, relative interest rate, and you took a profit rate. That maybe also that explain, well, according to my vision, why when you take a profit rate, it is deflating or reducing the power of the unit labor costs, of the relative unit labor costs. And for that reason, your result is lower. Because if you do this bilateral, country by country, you will find out a bigger number. I'm completely sure about that. But when you are taking a panel data, so that's an average. And for that reason, also, it's another reason why the number is low, right? So my question is, if this is in this input-output approach, it is difficult to put the interest rate there as the approach by Sheikh, because I really don't like to that you took a profit rate. For me, it's like correlated when unit labor costs and also deflating the power explanation. So my question is it difficult to put there capital flows or the interest rate by itself? So that's my question.
Yeah, and then the question, thank you very much, Francisco, for very, very enlightening comment, and of course the question. So if we were to include the interest rate, the question arises as to what determines interest rates. Because the interest rate could be an exogenous variable in terms of monetary policy, but it might be an endogenous variable within the framework of this analysis. And in particular, to be sure, for the classical political economy, the interest rate depends on the profit rate rather than the other way around. And we I mean, our most preferred theoretical framework in this paper is the classical political economy. But I think you have a very interesting point. We could also try and replicate the same analysis, taking into consideration the interest rate and see what comes out. Thank you very much, Francisco. And of course, thank you, Tony, for your questions as well.
Thank you.
Is there any other question?
Yeah, there seems to be a question by Daniel, Luis Daniel.
Yes,
Okay.
Luis Daniel, want to make a question.
Hello, thank you so much. I have two interrelated questions. The first one is, does the theory of absolute cost advantage of the real exchange rate depend on your particular price model? Or can we use another price or production model or a Kaleschian model or any cost-based price model? This is the first one. The second one, it seems that in this literature, real exchange rate have been approximated mainly by the vertically integrated unit labor costs, right? But it seems that there is no limit or a problem, at least, in considering a full model which captures the full prices of production. Do you think this can be done? Because maybe by computing the full prices of production, the results could be more robust to what you want to for your hypothesis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Luis Daniel. Let me tackle the first question, and then I will let Fahd to address the second one, if you don't mind, Fahd.
Yeah,
We do
okay,
it in the reverse case this time. Okay. Yes, Luis Daniel, thank you for your questions. And I think both are very interesting ones. With regards to the first one, of course, we are dealing with, in the model, we are using the classical theory of prices. I mean, the classical political economy theory of prices. Since we are, as Fahd mentioned at the outset of the presentation, we are looking at the relationship between market prices and the natural price, so-called natural price, in the sense that we consider that natural prices are the center of gravitation of market prices. So in the long run, market prices tend to adjust to natural prices as determined by the classical political economists. And not only that, I think that even Keynes himself considered that in his short period approach, short period analysis, he considered that actual values tend to gravitate towards short period equilibrium prices, to short period equilibrium values. I mean, it's sort of Marshallian approach of the short period analysis. So I think it is very relevant to consider that market prices obey in the long run a center of gravitation. That is the price theory that we use. And of course, the analysis can also be dealt with using a Kaleschian price formation, but then I presume we will come to some problems because theoretically speaking, there seem to be some problems. Perhaps some people talk about inconsistencies in Kaleschian price theory because the price level depends on the degree of monopoly, and the degree of monopoly depends on the markup, and the markup depends on the degree of monopoly, and so on and so forth. So, but to be sure, it would be an advantage to consider imperfect competition and non-price competition with regards to the determination on the exchange rate and the price dynamics in terms of the dynamics of market prices towards natural prices and so forth. So I think the the model can be replicated using different price theories. But in this case, in this particular paper, we preferred to use the classical political economy theory of prices. So, Fahd, would you like to address the second one?
The second one is, it seems that the literature has approximated the
real exchange rates.
I get no. In this case, it's not our case, because so what is for you the price of production? In what sense? In Marx sense or in Sraffa sense? So my question is, in fact, production prices are theoretical prices, no? It's not be able to calculate or to compute with our current techniques, no? So I think that using in the first by using the Smith decomposition, right? And he tried to show that market prices will be regulated only by vertically integrated unit labor cost. And then by extending this relationship within a country, conceived that maybe the vertically integrated unit labor cost can be a good factor for explaining the real exchange rate. But I think that in the absolute cost advantage theory, this problem maybe not occur, right? So I don't know if is a good answer in this case, but I don't think so.
Yes, Luis Daniel, still want to ask you one question. Luis Daniel, please.
Yes, thank you. Okay, this is my point. We can, based on the same data that you use to compute the unit labor cost, the vertical integrated unit labor cost, you can compute also the full prices of production.
No.
If we consider, for instance, the circulating capital model or a model with fixed capital, right? You use the standard framework, which also Sheikh uses for other papers, and you can compute them. You take the profit rate or the wage rate as given, and then you can compute a vector of prices for each one of the years. These prices could or could not be proportional to the total quantities of labor. Okay, so my point is that if rather than approximating the real exchange rate only through the vertically integrated unit labor cost, could you also do the same by considering the full prices of production? The full prices of production are the ones that you consider before you eliminate or set to equal to 1 your chi variable in your paper. That is, when you consider that there are variability in the profits to wages ratios in each one of the industries. So I'm not saying that what is the backbone of the prices of production, but full prices of production calculated as Rafa or I think, which are a little bit similar to what Marx had in mind in volume 3, which consider, in addition to the labor values, some variations because of the variations in the compositions of capital. Those prices of production could be more, even if they are not, I think it's a good, it's an interesting result which approximates better real exchange rate, full prices of production, or just the vertical integrated part of the prices of production. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, okay, you make a point, you made a point, okay.
Okay.
Okay, Francisco.
Yeah, Francisco.
You let me go back a little bit about the interest rate. Well, in the shake approach, in the original approach, it's only the vertically integrated unit labor cost, which is the main relevant variable, right? Then he added the interest rate following Harrod, the international economic books. That Harrod, he's following the classical political economy tradition. Because originally it's the capital inflows, which is important, but in order to capture these capital inflows, Sheikh and Harrod uses the interest rate. So I think also is part of the, I mean, taking the interest rate as a proxy is also part of the classical tradition. It's not a different one. So, I mean, and also again, that will be difficult to introduce in your model. I mean, this is a lot of countries, it's a lot of work. But I want to know if that would be difficult to introduce the interest rate instead of using the profit rates to capture these deviations from the vertical integrated average cost and the real exchange rate. That would be difficult to introduce this variable.
Well, I don't know if, but let me try and respond to what Francisco pointed out, Fahd, and then you add a further argument if you wish. Well, thank you, Francisco, for insisting on this point. And I think it's a very relevant issue, and you also gave us more ideas as to what to deal with in the future.
That's the point.
But yes, I mean, I'm afraid it will be not only difficult, but terribly difficult to deal with the interest rates. I mean, to begin with which interest rates? I mean, there's a number, a huge number of interest rates around. Which one to pick, And as you know, because I know your work, I know who you are. I mean, the interest rate is one of the variables that has given more troubles and problems to economic theorists. So it is terribly difficult to deal with the interest rate theoretically, not to speak of the interest rate empirically. And of course, it would be very interesting to accommodate it in the empirical analysis, and perhaps Fahd will have an inclination to tackle this problem in the future. Let me tell you that in my work, in my studies, I have dealt with the interest rate not only in my research, but also in my teaching. And I have always found the interest rate extremely complicated. I mean, is there consensus with regards what the interest rate is all about to begin with? I mean, we have several theories of interest rate. And I would say that, the most important economists in the history of economic thought have tried to unravel, the interest rate and to explain what the interest rate is all about. And I think we still don't know exactly what determines the interest rate and how it's to be determined. And we use the interest rate in various ways. I mean, look at the central banks all over the world. I mean, the central banks have picked the interest rate as the main monetary policy instrument. And I think it is very difficult to argue that they have been successful at all. Not even the Federal Reserve, which is the most important central bank in the world, and that controls the most important interest rate. So there are serious troubles empirically and theoretically with regard to the interest rate. But of course, we take up your point and we will try and deal with it. And if we come to troubles, which I'm sure we will come to you for answers.
Okay. I would like to discuss this further. Thank you.
I remember you asking me about whether I believe or not in the natural interest rate issue. Remember?
Yeah, yes, but this is another issue. This is another thing. I mean, it's different. I'm thinking in the difference, the gap. Let's say just the short run interest rate, the United States, Mexico, for example, or Spain, Germany. I don't know. That attract capital inflows for sure. But we can continue this discussion that I would like to.
No, you are right. But to be sure, I mean, there have been a sort of tendency, long-run tendency of convergence across interest rates in the world.
No, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in convergence in the interest rate.
No, the interest rates in the United States have been converging. Throughout the last 30 years, there have been convergence of interest rates in different time periods. You know, I mean, times. I mean, you have the short term, the medium term, and the long term interest rates, and they have converged throughout the years. In the last 30 years, there have been convergence for interest rates. Of course, that is another issue different from the natural interest rate discussion. But again, it is difficult to grasp what the natural interest rate is all about. I mean, there is a huge discussion about that. And I think we are not close to the conclusion. So there is no consensus at all about the interest rate. But again, that is one important reason why the interest rate is important, is a relevant variable to consider. And we will discuss that with Fahd. Thank you, Francisco.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. I don't know if we have any other questions. Someone? No, nobody? Okay. Yes, please. Who is? Penelope. Tira.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Yeah. What I'm going to say has nothing to do with the seminar today. It was an excellent seminar, I thought, and congratulations on getting the paper accepted by the journal Structural something and Economic Dynamics. Yes, yeah. Never be afraid of having a paper rejected. Keep going. You remember J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter books? She had got 6 rejections before Bloomsbury publishers took it up. And now she's a multi-millionaire. Now, what I wanted to say was this, you know, Ignacio said some very nice words at the beginning of this seminar. So I wanted to thank him and his colleagues, Benjamin, Hideo, for organizing this series of seminars to celebrate the 80th birthday of the journal Investigación, Económica. It's been an honor for me to have my name attached to this series. Extremely great. As Ignacio said, we've had a feast of papers over the last couple of months or so, different topics. And I hope that they have inspired, particularly the students that have been listening to these seminars, and will help them in their own thinking and their own work. So what I want to do now is to wish the journal every success in the years ahead. I'm sure it will be successful as long as Ignacio is the editor. And I wish all the students who are studying economic development every success in their future careers, particularly if they devote their thinking and time and effort to helping developing countries quest economic and social development. Thank you very much, García and Benjamin, and you for organizing.
Next to you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And thank to you.
So,
You're welcome.
so I think after one slightly heated debate between the School for Social Research, you see, alumni, it's time, you know, to say the following. On behalf of the university entities which we belong to, I mean the Faculty of Economics, its Department of Economics, the field for studies on economic development, which Hideo, Ignacio de Loyola, and me, myself, belong to. Thank you to all of you on behalf of the bodies I have quoted, and also from the National University of Mexico, which is always has a sort of backdrop behind us, supporting to celebrate this kind of seminars. But I like to also to make some special thanks before running away of this seminar. First of all, to thank to Tony Thirlwall, professor of Kent University at Canterbury, England, and also the professor, the lecturer, I don't know exactly, but we all are very proudly that Penny Pacheco Lopez is teaching to the same university, Kent University. Thank to you too, because you have been attending devotedly this seminar, whatever the hour in Southeast England. Thank you very much for that. And basically, Tony, because you have made our seminar, to say so, humbly accepting that the seminar could have your name, one name made exactly in the subject which encounter all of us in this occasion, economic growth and economic development. Thank to Fahd and Ignacio Loyola for the interesting subject addressed to the seminar today in this session, but also, as Ignacio Loyola said at the beginning, to all the conferencers, you know, the speaker, the people also participating in the question and answer session of the sixth section our seminar have had in this semester. Thank to all of the people I have quoted. Obviously, thanks to all our followers, our loyal followers, to say so, to the seminar along this 6th session, as I said, and because I'm very happy, you know, to say to thanks to the followers, because we have distinguished, you know, very well established teachers, lecturers, researchers from other superior or higher studies in economics and other subjects in Mexico. For instance, the National Polytechnic of Mexico, but also researchers from public state universities of Mexico. By memory, I have in mind people from Puebla, Juan Alberto Vázquez. I think his name sounds quite familiar for the social research school, you know, cited in this occasion, and also from Sinaloa and other, you know, universities. Thanks to our lecturers, researchers of the postgraduate Department of Economics, our students, you know, some of them, you know, are doing higher studies in abroad, you know, Aida García Lázaro, for instance. We are very grateful because your adherence to these seminars, and too many people, difficult, you know, to quote by memory in this occasion. Thank you very much to all of you. A virtual farewell by today, but as Ignacio also said, we will assemble another seminar for the next semester about the same subjects. But in this occasion, without any exclusion, of course, by design, we will have participants from national participants, to be more specific. We think we must make a space for the research just in this very moment in progress in many universities of Mexico, because we have deficit, we have many problems, you see, on growth, and also by extension, almost in development issues in our country. So be prepared, people doing, you know, postgraduate studies in other parts. I was almost in the point to say Great Britain, but obviously is included. Be prepared also, not just students, but people, you know, teaching or doing some research, working for many, you know, worldwide institutions. To submit the paper, to raise the hands, you know, and to to have your saying in this seminar, which now we are harvesting, and I think we are planting very promising seeds, and this is a very example of that. Farewell again.
Thank you very much. Thank you
much.
to all of you. Thank you for the questions, which were very relevant. And of course, Fahd and myself will take them seriously. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Luis Daniel. Thank you, Francisco, for your very, very interesting questions. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Fahd.